So I'm Isabel. I'm Annabelle. We're going to talk about growing up in limited time. As you can see, we are identical twins. From a professional standpoint, we get this life and death thing. I work as a prenatal genetic counselor, working with pregnant women focusing on beginning of life. And I work as a bereavement counselor, working with people at the end of life. And together, we are 82 years old. That's right. I know we look a lot young. Actually, my father used to double our age at every birthday. It made us feel kind of grown up. But he was doing that just for fun, but actually he was being optimistic. You see, we were born with cystic fibrosis. This is a genetic lung disease that is fatal. So back in 1972, most kids with CF didn't really live past age 10. And so we're going to be talking about buying time, losing time, and then gaining time. So when we were 5 years old, we started to have progressive lung infections that are characteristic of cystic fibrosis. Every single day we had to do treatments for hours at a time, 24/7. We had to inhale medication and then pound our chest in order to clear the congestion from our lungs. And we hated to do these treatments every day. Our father told us that every treatment we missed was one day less of our life. By the way, he got that from a cigarette commercial. So began our life of buying time. With every treatment, we bought time. Just like you have to eat well, exercise, you too are buying time. But we had to invest just a little bit more time. At least we had each other, and this ordeal was not so lonely. And then we started going into the hospital. We had to go to the hospital for IV antibiotics when the lung infections got very serious. We went in the hospital for 3 weeks, got out for a couple months, and then went right back in, again and again. The hospital became our second home. For us, it was our Club Med. In total, we've probably been in the hospital now about 60 weeks out of our entire lifetime, cumulatively speaking. Now, we all know about PDA. And I don't mean public displays of affection like you see in a movie theater. What I mean is personal death awareness. We all learn to live with this. We somehow make sense of it, we either ignore it or deny it, or we learn to find meaning in our lives. Now, most people learn about personal death awareness around adolescence, but it sort of hides away and is latent until about 50s or 60s, later in life. Now, for me, I was 6 years old when I was in the hospital, and a little girl across the hall from us with cystic fibrosis died. Now, a couple weeks later, my uncle invited us to go to his home in Seattle. And so I remember sitting in the airplane, looking out the window and thinking, wow, look at that beautiful blanket of clouds outside and the ocean below. I am alive. This is my first airplane ride, and it could be my last. So I better enjoy it. That trip was going to be a highlight of my life. Now, I created a graph here. This is our Seattle pictures back in 1972. The history of our graph, just to give you some visual representation of what our life is like. As you can see, during our teenage years, we started this downward spiral of progressive lung infections that damaged our lungs. So ultimately what we were doing is moving closer and closer to death. You see, cystic fibrosis is the kind of disease where the more candles there are on the birthday cake, the harder it is to blow them out. But fortunately, as we were getting older, the median life expectancy for kids with cystic fibrosis was increasing. So when we were 16, the life expectancy had gone up to about 19. And when we were about 25, the life expectancy was now around 30. So it felt like all of our lives we were constantly dodging statistics. So what kept us going? Well, a little bit of defiance is actually good medicine. If we had internalized all these statistics, we probably wouldn't have lasted as long. We had to learn to make the most of living and dying at the same time. We realized that it was our attitude that had determined whether or not we saw the grave as half full or half empty. There were basically two ways that we could react to dying. We could move towards it, or we could move away from it. The way we moved away from it is We did what most people do. We denied it. We buried our head in the sand. We pretended that we weren't going to die. We wanted, after all, to be normal, just like everyone else. We studied hard, we made goals, we planned for the future. We went to Stanford, and we borrowed thousands and thousands of dollars worth of loans, thinking we're not going to have to pay this back. Believe it or not, we're still paying those loans back. We also moved away from that by filling our time with distraction. An occupied mind, after all, is fully alive. And so, for example, when we were in the hospital quite a bit, we did not want to waste time. We wanted to make the most of it. And so we started a t-shirt painting business. My parents supplied the paints, and the nurses and doctors, our customers, would bring in their own t-shirts. And so for $5 a shirt, we would the orders just piled in, and we would get busy. So after a typical 3-week hospital stay or so, we would go home with about $300 in cash. Now, honestly, I don't want to give the impression that sort of we've mastered this life or death thing and we're completely comfortable with our mortality. You know, it's a process. We move back and forth between our facing and seeing our death. We stared at death straight in the face. And what did that do for us? It gave us fear, anger, anxiety, but it also empowered us greatly to live each day. As we experience all of these emotions growing up, we learn to hold on to these emotions, to look at them, to feel them, and then gradually talk about them. The more we talk about dying, the less scary it became. And so ultimately we discovered that fear has a purpose. It mobilized us to do something. And so we learned as much as we could about our disease, and we learned what power and control do we have over staving off our death. When we were 11, we started to go to a summer camp for children with cystic fibrosis. Every year at this camp, there was a memorial service where the names of the kids who had passed away was read out loud at the campfire. Well, then it felt like our fate was sealed. Someday our name would be read as well. But something magical happened in this experience. We learned that we are all in this together. And it was better to know these people than not know these people. All of them taught us something. For example, Michelle taught us to use photography to express herself. And that illness can be beautiful, defiant, seductive. Haley called us right before she died. We went to her hospital room and she said, "I just want to tell you that I love you." And so through knowing these people, we got to know what the core of being human is all about. What the core of why we were here is all about. To connect with each other, to revel in the human spirit. And that, like the rest of us, at the end of the day, all they wanted and all we want is to be loved and remembered. Now, there are some benefits of acknowledging our limited time. We understand that we only have this one lifetime to make an impact. And so we volunteer, we work in the healthcare profession, we wrote a book, we have a film, we hike and swim and do things that we truly enjoy. Because our lives are really, that's what it's for, it's just enjoy. I'm going to skip that. So ultimately, over time, we did not have the time to procrastinate. And so we developed what I call GSD personality, get shit done. So we have, obviously, by now you understand that we spend most of our time trying to, as students of death and dying, and yet somehow, for whatever reason, fate took a spin, and our final exam was postponed. In 1983, Dr. Joel Cooper, working out of Toronto, Canada, invented the first lung transplant. Lung transplantation became a new hope for people with end-stage cystic fibrosis. At the age of 25, my lung disease was so bad that I could only breathe with 20% of a normal lung. I had oxygen on all the time, and I could barely breathe. That's when lung transplant was offered to me. It was an opportunity to buy more time. I had to ask myself, do I want more time? Would you take more time if you had another chance? I said yes. Despite the scary odds, I could have died with my native lungs, or I could have taken this leap of faith and jumped into a whole new arena, hoping for the best. Now let me remind you that I work as a genetic counselor with pregnant women. And to me, transplant and pregnancy is all not that different. Basically, you're waiting, right? You wait, you hope, you have uncertainty. But you're waiting for a new life and a miracle, and the chance for an incredible change of existence. However, it's not without challenges and not without risk. But I did say yes to transplant, and I had a transplant at the year 2000 at 28. My organ donor was a 29-year-old man from Portland, Oregon. Healthy guy who suddenly had a headache one day. Turned out he had a brain aneurysm. Here was a guy who probably never thought much about death at all, and suddenly he had death confronted him right away. And here was me, thinking about death my whole life, saved because of him. So after waiting 16 months on the waiting list, I received the lungs of James Dorn. Now, Anna's transplant clearly gave me a tremendous amount of hope. The only downside was, well, now with different lungs, we were no longer identical twins. But I still hoped for the same chance for myself. When I was 32 years old, my health started to deteriorate, and I also got listed for a double lung transplant. Now, my story isn't about the years and months of waiting that Anna had experienced. My story was about the value of every single minute. Now, in January of 2004, my lungs started to fail. Despite the best aggressive treatment for CF, somehow I just wasn't getting better. Now, I was on the waiting list, that was good, but so were hundreds of other people. And so, unfortunately, my lungs did fail, and I had to go on a ventilator, a machine to keep me breathing. Now, this is when time took on a whole new meaning. Every hour, every minute mattered, because I had 7 days on a ventilator to wait for an organ donor. After 7 days, I would be seen as too weak to survive the transplant surgery. And so my family surrounded my bedside praying for a miracle. How could they pray for somebody else to die? It just didn't seem right for someone else to die so I could live. And so actually they weren't asking for someone to die, because people die every day all around us. What they were really praying for was that somebody would say yes to organ donation. Now, at the exact same time, somewhere down south in Central California, another family was praying for a miracle. Their young son was in a car accident and sustained a brain injury. Now, every second mattered to him. His brain was swelling rapidly, and so they were all praying and hoping he would get better. But sadly, fate took a turn, and he was declared brain dead just 3 days after his car accident. And so Xavier Cervantes became an organ donor. His mother had remembered that he told her he wanted to donate his organs if anything happened to him. He did that after he signed up after he got his driver's license. And so they made the most selfless decision to give the gift of life to at least 3 people at a time of tremendous personal tragedy. So thankfully, my body matched Xavier's blood type and size. And when I had approximately 12 hours left to live, I received Xavier's lungs. It was a miracle. Now, a couple days later, I did experience my own human resurrection. I had a very strong spiritual experience right before I went unconscious. I felt like there was going to be a miracle. And so, of course, when I woke up, the first words that I said to my family were, I think there was a miracle. And there was. We're here today. Now, organ donation is one way that we can defy death. You know, Xavier died many years ago, but a part of him still lives on inside of me. Now, 2 years after my transplant, this is Xavier, a picture taken a few days after my transplant. I don't remember that because the drugs were so great. And 2 years after my transplant, I learned to play the bagpipes. Now, this is a very loud and powerful instrument, but it's not me that's playing them. You know, Xavier died 9 years ago, and yet now through the pipes, the world can still hear him. One of our cystic fibrosis nurses once said to us, you guys just don't die. And she was joking, of course, but we realized, you know what, our time will come. We are living on borrowed time. Truthfully, throughout human history, most human beings on this earth have not lived past the age of 40. So to live with cystic fibrosis past 40 is truly a blessing, and each day is a gift. We are on borrowed time, so we have to accept whatever comes. Because of my weak immune system from transplant and cystic fibrosis, I currently have metastatic bowel cancer. So I know that my time will come, and my sister and I at some point will be separated. But at the same time, I welcome every birthday. I welcome every process of aging, every wrinkle, even menopause. Bring it on. Now, what has really gotten us this far? Well, I think it's our love. I think loving one another is the greatest antidote against dying. You know, illness can be a very lonely experience, and we feel so privileged that we have never, ever felt alone. You know, our story with terminal illness is not uncommon. Remember, living is the leading cause of death. And so we will all reach that day someday when we will die. I just feel like everybody between birth and death experiences one activity more than anything else. We all breathe. Each of you today will probably breathe about 28,800 times. Now, there's a miracle happening unconsciously as our lungs exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide with each passing second. Now, if you live to be 80, you'll probably breathe about 2.3 million times. That truly is a miracle. So we close today by inviting you to pay attention to your breathing, and that way you too can feel fully alive. And finally, after your time is up, if you'd like to give the gift of time, please sign up to be an organ donor. Thank you very much.